Some viewers may find the following video disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised.
The Amateur. A film that, on the surface, markets itself as a tense emotional thriller about grief, justice, and the inner workings of the CIA. But peel back the sleek cinematography and well-timed explosions, and what you're left with is a cleverly packaged piece of pro-CIA propaganda. A narrative designed not just to entertain, but to distort public understanding of what intelligence agencies like the CIA actually do, and how they actually operate. The film follows a cryptographer who, after losing his fiancée in a terrorist attack, essentially forces his way into field operations to pursue justice. It's an appealing concept, personal, emotional, and easy to root for. But it's also an incredibly effective narrative tool for reshaping the image of everyone's favorite terrorist organization, the CIA. Instead of presenting the agency as a historically controversial and structurally opaque institution, The Amateur opts for a familiar Hollywood trope, the few bad apples storyline, which is so often used in propaganda movies. Corruption is reduced to the actions of a rogue operative or two, while the core of the institution, represented by the protagonist and a few sympathetic figures, including the head of the agency, remain noble and misunderstood. This few bad apple framework isn't just a narrative shortcut in the film, it's a distortion of reality. Historically, many of the CIA's most controversial actions, from regime changes to torture programs, were not accidents or the results of individual actors going rogue. They were systematic decisions approved and institutionalized at the highest of levels. But films like The Amateur flatten that complexity into a digestible story where institutional accountability is replaced by individual redemption arcs. This is where the propaganda becomes particularly effective. By portraying the CIA as a flawed but ultimately well-meaning institution, it reinforces the lie that any significant wrongdoing is the exception, not the rule. It reassures the viewer that the system works, or can work, if the people just do the right thing. This is more than a narrative choice. It's a political statement disguised as plot development. Now allow me to go off on a brief tangent. I have, and I say this without any exaggeration, a 15-page document outlining the technical and procedural inaccuracies in just the first 30 minutes of the film. From cybersecurity practices that defy basic logic, to firearms being handled in ways that would embarrass a high school drama club. The errors are constant and often absurd. On the surface, these may seem like trivial details, but they actually speak to something deeper, a subtle reinforcement of what I'd call the cinematic Dunning-Krueger effect. In psychological terms, the Dunning-Krueger effect describes how people with limited knowledge or skill often overestimate their competence. The Amateur leans into this by presenting a protagonist with virtually no field training, who not only survives, but outperforms trained CIA agents. This depiction, however implausible, flatters the viewer. It sends the message that anyone could be a hero if sufficiently motivated. This narrative tactic democratizes the agency's operations, making them feel accessible, even moral, and, by extension, unthreatening. And that's precisely the problem. By reducing intelligence work to a personal quest, the film masks the deeply impersonal and often problematic and unnecessary violent nature of the real-world intelligence operations. It erases the historical consequences of covert action and instead replaces them with a simplified revenge story where American intervention is always morally justified. Because in real life, there's never been a country that democratically elected a socialist government leading to a CIA-sponsored and orchestrated coup, which later led to a fascist dictatorship, right? Moreover, the portrayal of the enemy in the film is troublingly vague. The antagonists are loosely defined foreign terrorists. Their motives, histories, and cultural contexts are either ignored or reduced to a few aggressive sound bites. There's no attempt to explore why such violence might occur, or how US foreign policy might have played a role. The film offers no critique, no ambiguity, only a straightforward, morally convenient villain for the protagonist to chase. And granted, he is sponsored by the bad apples, but that moment is left so ambiguous that the only thought left is, well, the bad guys are bad, but they don't represent the whole agency. In summary, The Amateur is not simply a flawed action film. It's a carefully curated representation of the CIA, one that deflects criticism and recasts systemic issues as isolated incidents. It uses emotional storytelling and technical gloss to rehabilitate an institution that historically has not earned the benefit of the doubt. Through narrative sleight of hand, it tells audiences not to worry, the system is under control, the good guys are still out there, and any mistakes are just the result of a few individuals acting out of line. But if history tells us anything, it's that systemic issues cannot be resolved by individual heroism. And films like The Amateur, which suggest otherwise, don't just entertain, they directly mislead. So yes, it's just a movie, but it's also a movie that's selling a comforting myth, one where intelligence agencies are flawed but well-meaning, enemies are faceless, and justice is just one emotionally wounded genius away.
Have we ever tried to meddle in other countries' elections?
Oh, probably, but it was for the good of the system in order to avoid the communists from taking over. For example, in Europe, in 47, 48, 49, the Greeks and the Italians, we
don't do that now, though? We don't mess around other people's elections, Jim?
Only for a very good cause.
Can you do that? Do a Vine video on a former CIA director.
Only for a very good cause in the interests of democracy.
All right, thanks for being here.